Welcome to the English Homemaker podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things home. A realistic but fresh view of homemaking from the suburbs of the south of England. I'm your host, Alissa Evelyn. Welcome to episode 23 of the English Homemaker. Hello everyone, how are you today? I hope you're having a great day, whatever it is that you're doing. Today I'm bringing you part 2 of the Permaculture Principles podcast I have recorded with my brother. We did record in 2 separate sections, which is why there's a bit of a different feel to each episode. And this one is deep, man. It's intense. There's a lot in here. It goes really, really deep. My brother got super philosophical and it was great. It was so much fun. Of course, if you haven't yet listened to the first episode of this 2-part series, then make sure you go and listen to that one. It will lay the groundwork for this episode and it will make a lot more sense to you. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Hello, Martin. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you so much.
Good. We were just chatting off record about how it's currently the day after the full moon and how I've been feeling all the feels this morning and how every single time I have one of those days and I remember to look at what the moon is doing, it's usually either full or new. It's mostly a full moon when I'm feeling a bit like not overly emotional, because I don't really believe in that phrase, but just like all the feelings of everybody, not just me, but everyone in the family.
Yeah. We find the same here. I think that it's really interesting if you start to link your life to natural rhythms that your body will sync up to that, or you'll just suddenly become aware of patterns in your monthly cycle as a man or a woman when you are the most capable, and there's times you're the most emotional, or those times where you're the most irrational. And so, we've been looking at that for maybe 8 years, like just being really aware of, like, I feel like this. Why do I feel like this? Okay, what's going on in nature? Like all our kids get a bit more loopy when the wind's really high up and things like that. Certain wind directions, certain pressure changes, but definitely lunar bodies that's really influencing both our capacities, both male and female capacities in different ways. And I think if everybody just took a little bit of like, why does there certain days a month where I feel like this? And then you go, oh, okay, where for a man, when the moon's rising or when the moon is falling, I think it generally has a higher impact, if you're not constantly messing with it with food, on the way you express hormonally.
This actually leads into almost the first principle we're talking about today, which is principle number 7, design from patterns to details. Does that not actually fit beautifully?
Yeah, and it's also what we talk about every single time we talk, right?
Yeah.
I think whether it's private or on podcast, it's exactly what we talk about.
It is what we talk about.
Yeah. And I think that once you design that, or start thinking that way, you'll thrive in the home, in life, in general.
Yep.
Because if you understand the pattern that leads to the detail, rather than going, I want this detail, you can control details happening. But if you change the patterns, the details will follow. Always. Whether it's a pattern of thought, a pattern of input, and it's really going back to or looking at detail and go, okay, this happens all the time. Like, I have a day a month where my brain just functions in no way. Like more hormonal, more thing, really struggle to just achieve anything. Sometimes 2 days. And for me, I think it's like 2 days before the full moon. So my testosterone levels are generally really low. I feel kind of all over the place and just go a little bit mental because I just don't feel like I have any capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm aware of that. I just go and do grunt work on those days. Like, I'm going to lift rocks from here to there because that's about all my brain is good for. But as I've understood that generally on those days, like not always, but like, let's go with 80% of the time, I will feel around that time, this feeling. I then, I recognize this feeling. I'm just going to do this today. And then I allow this pattern that happens over time to affect those details.
Yes. I feel like once again, after that first podcast, a pattern has emerged for me of realizing I notice the patterns, I can see the patterns, but I struggle to get to the details part and figure out how to optimize those patterns. But I think, as we also spoke about last time, as a woman, we're supposed to repress our patterns and pretend they don't exist. And actually, I think it's so important that somehow, as a society, I don't know how, we can get back to it being okay for people to feel funny on the full moon and for women to feel funny on different moons. And I don't know how that would look. I don't know historically. You probably have done more research about that.
Yeah.
Historically, how that could have looked, how that might have been honored in certain societies. Do you know anything about that?
I do. And it's really, I think that when you have certain things where women have spaces for their time of the month is a really regular cultural truth across a lot of cultures, especially before agriculture. And I think that what you have in a functioning home economy where the needs of the household are met by the home and its surroundings and the community close to it, you see a lot more, there's just a lot more variability in the work. And so you can, like we do, you do have the option to go, okay, today I do not feel creative, therefore I will not create. Because there's always something to be doing when you have a functioning home economy. And I think that that could speak to everywhere. I think you can make a version of the home economy in every environment. I think there are places where it's harder, but also building in broader patterns into your life that allow for that. A lot of times when people say, oh, I can't address the pattern. And I think last week when I was learning, I could see myself going through the pattern of learning and I just wanted to skip over it. But knowing the pattern, you have to go, okay, I have to either relinquish the pattern, acknowledge my frustration, and then get on with it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that looked like me telling my teachers, like, I am just being thick now, but just give me a day and it will all click into place and I will be incredible tomorrow. Obviously being a little bit facetious, but like, and sometimes there are things we just can't address, certain traumas that you don't get to deal with. And then, we talked about this a little bit, I think there is a place in our lives where we just need to get over it. And I think, especially in our modern world, that is part of the problem, is that we have been hyper individuated to the point where there is nothing grander than ourselves and our current needs. And having something that's grander than that religiously, and we talked about this a little bit last time, having something grander to call yourself to that allows you to make something smaller is something that has been true throughout history, then allows you to make patterns and details that are more real and therefore allows you to get past those things and or to deal with them in the level that they should be dealt with. Because sometimes we go, oh, this is a small thing. But if you expand it over a lifetime or you expand it like, I just feel a little bit like, for me, like starting to learn those little tells in your body of like, oh, I'm starting to get sick. Okay. Because usually you don't get sick all at once, even though it feels like it. Usually you'll look at your nail beds or the pattern of your skin, how pale you are or how thin your skin looks. A lot of people get sort of yellowy jaundice or very see-throughy on their skin, especially skin where you're not exposed to the sun. You can look at it and go, oh, I'm getting a bit veiny, or my nail beds are degrading, or my teeth feeling a bit loose, or my jaws feeling a bit tight. All these little things that are signals that you've been under stress for a period of time that you haven't been aware of, and learning those things so that you can inform the pattern. So that, but then once you see this pattern happening, you can go, what causes this pattern of behavior in the first place? What pattern of like disconnection, or what things in my life do I need to change to get to this? Is there stuff I can change? What patterns am I looking at? And this is getting quite complex. I hope we're still holding on to the thing here.
I'm with you.
Yeah. And what stuff do I just need to get over? Like, okay, someone hurt me X hundred years ago, and that really hurts. But because I believe this is actually more important, I'm happy to sacrifice this, get rid of it, get rid of this burden. In Christianity, they call it putting it at the foot of the cross. In Buddhism, they sort of like talk about letting it go. There's all these different ways of saying, like, there is points where if you have something grander than yourself, you're not worshipping yourself. If you can give that over to something grander, then you can surrender it, as long as you then leave it somewhere. Leave it there. Never go back to it.
I suppose that's also the idea of people burning things or planting a tree or like having a significant moment somewhere where they just are purposeful about letting go of that thing.
Oh man, I was reading this really cool story about people making fetishes, like dolls of sin, and burning them at midwinter, and I thought that was wonderful. Like this point that in the middle of winter you make a vessel for the failings of sin, the things that you hated of that year, who you didn't want to be, and making a fetish and calling it something like, did not hug my children enough, prioritized work over this. I mean, this was about hunting and things, but the idea that you could take those things, make a vessel of them, put them in there, and then burn them and just let them go in a festival of like fire and joy. So like in the midwinter celebration, you would release your sin, acknowledging them, but letting it go so it doesn't continue to infect your life. I love that idea because it's such making the doll from things around you, making it from like scraps or twigs or leaves or whatever, and then go, oh, imagine just like letting go the sins sins, I guess, the things that weigh you down, the patterns that you beat yourself up with, and going like, what if I let go of that so it stopped being a toxic thing in the back, that pattern of self-hatred, that pattern of loathing, that pattern of not enough, that started as something very real sometimes, that then makes it hard to let go of. But then that pattern of that becomes a pattern of thought, a pattern of thing, and then not having a place to let it go culturally, that then becomes a problem that then manifests. Sorry, getting back to your actual point, is that a lot of these things are small patterns where we don't have a way to deal with it. They become a cultural pattern. And then we go, well, the culture fixes it. You're like, well, it started with the only thing that you can change is you. And your home what you teach in your home culture, what you choose to do, what patterns you accept, what is your grander pattern, what's the thing that you center yourself to. And if the only thing you're centering yourself is like a shitty story or just yourself, you are always going to fail. You're never going to have something grander. The family is a great thing to center to, but also then you also as a family have to all choose the family. Because if someone chooses themselves in the family, it actually becomes worship of that person, not the family.
Yeah.
And then you become, you end up idolizing or making time for, it can be a kid, and it's not because they're bad. They're just kids and they want attention. And if you haven't prioritized them and they see, oh, the family is important, they utilize that as in their immaturity to do that. And you can have partners that do that. You can have that. And I think it's really important to then go, we all choose to follow this. We all believe this, whether that's like a family mission statement or a life goal or a religion or any form of faith or just a set of beliefs. Again, even if you were to reiterate to the permaculture principles are pretty good. If you were to follow those, the ethics and the principles of permaculture, that would be a good orientation. But then you'd all have to understand that and then go, okay, does this decision follow these? And it gives you something that's beyond yourself to orientate to.
The patterns one is all of these are really good. I think I've said that about every single one when I was editing. It's like every single one, I was like, this is such a good one. Yeah. Patterns is key, not just to notice the patterns around you in nature, but the patterns in your home and the patterns in your mind are things that cause so much trouble. They stop you from progressing. And I think for me, one of the key moments of noticing patterns is the patterns in my own children and the patterns that are a reflection of my own patterns. And that's the scariest part of parenting ever. Yeah, when they hit a certain age and they're like not just like toddling along and they just really start properly reflecting you and copying what you say, how you act in certain moments, and oh my, that is quite the thing. And then I think for a lot of people that's a turning point to realize that change may be required.
Amen. Yeah.
I'm trying to work out, I got this lovely book the other day. I've been wanting a permaculture book for ages that really sort of speaks to me. I've got a few permaculture books that are like, I think I've got one called Permaculture for the Rest of Us, which I thought, oh, that's cool. Maybe that'll be about living on like less land, but they still have an acre in that book. And it's really all about how they work their acre. Yeah. But I got a book that's lovely. The Milkwood Permaculture Living Handbook, which is by Kirsten Bradley, is lovely. It's all about habits to create a more meaningful life. It's very dippable. And what I really like about it is she goes through each of the principles and puts something tangible to it, which is lovely. And I mean, everything in it is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I'm suggesting it because I think it's more like £15 than 50. So if anyone
Yeah,
wants
because
to know,
Retrosuburbia is a great book if you live in a small place.
yes,
For like practical things in a suburbia place, because it's all scaled. But it is 60 quid a book. But it's a tome of knowledge.
It is so expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was really happy to get this one, and it is very. I think it's easy. It's just it's very kind of coffee table in a way. Like, it's very pretty, but you can pick it up. She's written things like with patterns, things like making a base map. She was talking about how, you know, when you go for a walk and you see the path that has been created by the council, but then
The
there's a
desired
path
paths,
that's been there's paths been made by other people. It's things like observing where you think you're going to go and where you actually go. It's noticing that, and not where you want to go, but what's actually happening. And I like that as both a metaphor, but actually about a real thing, because she was saying that, you know, if in your garden you keep actually walking not on your path, but in a different path, you should probably move said path and think about how it's functioning and how you're using it. But there's quite practical things like knowing the soil, knowing your local climate, following those patterns. I'd love to, for example, not be obsessed with looking at my phone to know what the weather's going to be for the day. But in England, it's so very difficult to know, because the morning today is this gorgeous autumnal fog with all of the spider webs, and it looks like someone's actually just decorated for Halloween. Yeah. And it's very, very beautiful, but the weather forecast thinks that's going to burn off. It's going to be a sunny day. So I've put my washing out. It's pretty much why I look at weather forecasts. But also, in my heart of hearts, I kind of think it's probably not going to do that. But it's so variable in the UK. I feel like, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm ever going to know without looking at a forecast. Do you know?
Oh, yeah. So this is one thing that, like, we built in. Like, again, a lot of people go like, oh man, it's all this stuff. Unbelievably stupid when I got here with certain things that, like, you practically want to know, but you don't. I think it's really interesting if you just actually look at what's happening outside and take a rough wind direction most days, you can have a really good idea of what's happening within like about a month of going to the beginning observation.
But then changes, presumably each season is different though.
I mean, yes, but generally if the wind's blowing from the west and there is grey clouds, it's going to rain here, right? If the wind's blowing from the east, it's generally going to be drier, unless I hear thunder, and then there'll be a big storm, right? It's things like that. So when it's coming from the south,
you have like you don't have a you have a flag, don't you? I suppose you could tell.
Yeah, we have a flag. So, but also like we're in a valley, and like I do that. Some days there's not a lot of wind, but you go out, lick your finger. Which side is dry?
I try and do that, but I can't seem to ever do that properly.
I mean, that's my point. But there's the thing: just get a little, one of those little weathercocks. Stick it in your garden, even on the floor. They generally a more sensitive one. We have like those little pinwheels for making the mice stay out of my beds, or the voles. Sorry. So we have pinwheels stuck in the garden, and where they turn, especially the smaller ones, that's a little bit easier. So if there's even a wind, then it catches that, and you get to an idea. But I think the thing is, like, the more you observe, the better. But I think, again, going back to the beginning, like having patterns that allow you to be variable. I mean, when we're in the UK, the weather is really changeable, but the point is
put a coat on.
Put a freaking coat on. Yeah. In the UK, the wonderful thing is that all year round, in the bottom 2/3 of the UK, you can go out barefoot, and all you need to have is a decent waterproof and up layer of wool. It can be a base layer, mid layer, or an upper layer. Yeah. And you then can go anywhere. That all fits. And I know from a lot of experience, even with 3 kids with you, it'll fit very easy in a small Fjallraven tank and sort of style bag. You can have it packed down as long as you just wrap it up tight, and you have it with you all the time. And if you have that and a water bottle in there, generally a 2-litre one if you're taking out multiple children, or you're going in the garden, you can do pretty much anything. And even if it does rain for a bit, it doesn't matter. Yeah. And if you make that part of your family culture, that, we don't really care about the weather, we go do things, then you'll find the joy of the rain, and you'll find the joy of that. There are days where it's just meaning But if you start like to recognize patterns in your weather as well, it will allow you to inform the details of your day. Right? But that's just a case of going back to the first principle and observe. You're not going to, the first thing you do is look out. If you don't do things like at breakfast, I look out the window and I look at where the tops of the trees, are they going to the left or the right or towards me or not moving at all? Just really basic stuff, right? And you can get all these cool books and you do all that. But the most important thing is look outside. What is the weather doing now? Yeah. Last week, it did the same and this weather happened. Oh, right. And there are seasonal variabilities, but there's actually kind of like truths, right? If the weather is coming up out the south, is it generally going to be warmer? Oh, yes. But for you, because coming a bit off the sea, does it sometimes have warm with showers? Yeah. Okay, great.
I think for me, I noticed the annual thing. So like we have like grey years, like the last 2 years. It's just grey and rainy almost every day. And we have hot years, and then the hot years, it sort of gets hot from about April. It stays until about October. We get a few days in there that are, very English days, but they're more few and far between. And then we'll have like tropical storms and it will get extremely hot, and the hot will stay for a good couple of weeks somewhere in about sort of July time. So I notice those, but I find every day to be a tricky one. I'd like to get to know that. So perhaps I shall pay more attention.
Principle 1.
Observe and interact. So the next one is number 8, integrate rather than segregate. And this is something I know you're actually very good at. Again, I think this is something our society likes to do. We like to compartmentalize. We like to separate. And because arguably a lot of the time makes more money probably. And
of course.
Yeah, it's easier as well, I think, for a lot of people to do that.
And I think we talk about this in terms of like, you have 2 options in every single situation. One is to build a relationship and the other one is to control. Yeah. The control will make you feel like you're in control. But that control will take energy that will come from someone else who is probably controlling you. And that can come from money, consumption, all these different things. Whereas relationship will be slightly difficult at the beginning. And as you work through it, will be the richest possible option, always. So that's the integrated life, right? I'm happy to have this relationship. Segregation is, I'm going to have this here and this here and this here and this here. And I'm going to have my fitness time. I'm going to have my self-care time. I'm going to have this. I have this. I'm going to have this 87-part plan for my life. Instead go, okay, this is what I would love my life to be like. What do I need to look at and change? What parts of my life are segregated? How do I reintegrate this into the relationship, the beautiful flow that I want my life to be, that is also the most fruitful for my family? And I think when we look at like psychological modeling, the whole point of it is to get to a point of self-actualization where you are not segregated separate parts and like your hopes and desires and then your reality, that you actually get to a point where you're self-actualized, and that's where you should find the most contentment. But because it is so much more profitable to keep you unhealthy, unhappy, and buying lots of shit to try and fix that, or to try and fix and trying to integrate it by more control, which will never happen. The more control you put onto any relationship, the more it is likely to fall apart, not the more it's likely to think. Whereas the more you surrender to most relationships, especially ones that you want, obviously, the more you are going to find integration, joy, happiness, all those things. But it is really, really uncomfortable. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to not do that. Like, there is a point in every piece of learning, doing, integrating, whether it's a garden, making cheese, deep personal work, trauma integration, dealing with like your kids and all of that. Every single aspect was like really practical, really trivial. There is a bottleneck that feels awful, feels like you're losing everything that you had control over, everything is slipping through your fingers, and but if you push through that bottleneck, actually do the work of being who you want to be, it always will be better.
Yes.
Even if the worst bottleneck happens, the other side of it is always better, because relationship, God, the divine, whatever you want to call all of those things, whether it's in the garden, in cheese making, in something really trivial like today, sausage making.
There's nothing trivial about sausage making. That's
Nothing
a very
trivial about sausage
important
making, but like comparatively to like soul work, right? Then it's just, you're just going to always be better. It's always going to win. I don't know if we talked about this before, but once, have you ever read Gulliver's Travels or watched Gulliver's Travels?
Yeah, I know the story, yeah.
Right. There's a bit where he lands on an island of tiny people, and the tiny people put 1,000 million tiny ropes over him to hold him down. He can't stand up initially, and then he breaks one rope, and then it gets easier and easier to stand up. And I always think that's a really good metaphor, because obviously, if you read the original Gulliver's Travels, it's about metaphors of being. Most of the islands are about a type of society that he's seeing in France at the time. I think France at the time, and it's really actually quite a deep cultural analysis in the form of a fiction.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea there is like every single thing that you are trying to control is a bond to who you should be and your capacity to stand as yourself or stand as a home. Because, you know, as a mother, as a father, or as a homemaker in general, whether you have a traditional, non-traditional, whatever type of home, the other people's bonds are your bonds too, but you standing up helps them stand up. You breaking one tiny bond, relinquishing one element of control for a relationship breaks a bond that then allows you more freedom. And the more you break, the easier it is to break them.
Yes.
Like Gulliver.
I was reading today something about how it's not usually until our late 30s, 40s, 50s historically that we all at some point wake up. It's the sort of midlife crisis kind of thing, is supposedly this idea that we realize that we have been living a story. We realize we've been really living for other people and their expectations. And we actually start to think, oh, but hang on, what is it that I want? And how do I want to live? And I think that's interesting that historically the midlife crisis was 50s. And I think most women these days are experiencing it in their mid to late 30s. And I think that's so interesting that it's changed so quickly. I don't know if that's just that we're surrounded by all these different ways of living on social media. So we're just surrounded by it earlier. I don't know.
I think it's the culture, because there's not a culture that we all agree to. We don't even watch all the same movies anymore. Like, you can say to someone, oh, have you watched this movie? And they're like, oh, no, I don't have Netflix. Or, oh, and someone said, do you watch this now? And I go, I don't have Netflix. Oh, have you seen this on Apple TV? And I'm like, I don't have Apple TV. So we don't even have that shared culture of like, not everyone goes and sees the blockbuster movie every year. Like something simple, like everyone, when we were kids, knew Titanic. Everyone had watched it multiple times because it was the movie, or Romeo and Juliet with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yep.
And you're like, everyone knew it. So whatever else you may have not had in common, you had simple cultural touchstones to pitch in for. And generally people had the same desires for their life in a very linear fashion that was dictated by the culture. And as we remove that culture, some of which is really good removing, and some of it means that you're just suddenly leaving people unbound and really open to be a victim. Yeah, it's a really good unbinding, but it means that then you just have yourself. And that means that when you have more time to focus on yourself, you can awaken to those things earlier. But there's something really negative about that too, because once you get there, it's very disturbing. And the more self-aware you are, and the more you allow the world to initiate you, or your children to initiate you, it can be quite disturbing, because they're going like mirroring something to you, as you said earlier on, and then suddenly you're like, stop mirroring. Allowing relationship and allowing the breaking of your ego and the reforming of that through your children as an initiatory rite is essential.
Yes, agreed. I think this does lead back to this point beautifully, actually. Integration rather than segregation.
Yeah.
I think works on so many levels, and we see so many negative things about when you segregate. So even if we take something as obviously, blindingly obvious as COVID, when we were all segregated and we couldn't connect, like so many things fell apart. It took years to feel like, and I still don't feel like we've reached there, coming back to a place where our lives are connected again, because there's still a lot of fear around that sort of thing. We could also look at something like farming. Like organic farming serves to integrate all the systems into one. And if you separate and you do monocultures, it just doesn't work. It degrades the soil. And if you repeat do bad things happen. And the same, as we've been saying with families, if you try and all live these separate lives, but instead of working as a team, as a segregated team that are all on the same path, it ain't going to work.
No.
There's so many different ways of looking at it. And there's other things, like you can take it really small and practical in terms of like in the house integration, things like habit stacking, like where actually things flow beautifully. I remember Alissa Evelyn did a lovely video about this, which really sort of changed my way of thinking about it. And I think it was about the wood fire, and she turned on the wood fire and all the different things you can then use. You put the clothes next to the wood fire and they will dry, and you can keep your tea hot on the stove. And it was a lot more complicated than that. It's a beautiful video. But
I know what you're talking about as well. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and a lot of her videos are like that, saying like she grows a beautiful grapevine outside her house, which then
shades, cools them down. Yeah,
it works on so many levels. And I think there's a lot about seeing, not separating, because you could put the grapevine outside to look at it and it'd be lovely, but how can you actually incorporate that into the system so it works better all together? And I think something as simple as chickens work really, really well, or pets that will eat your food. So yesterday, I was just desperate for some animal to eat some leftover scraps. I have to put them in the bin. There's nowhere else for them to go. We don't have a very brilliant composting system I can put anything in like that. And if we had chickens or a dog, then I would have had a place to put those things, and it would have functioned more as a system. And I like the way that you guys have lived I love it, because you sort of started with one animal and then you kind of realize, well, you kind of need cats, because then, and like all these sort of things kind of roll on from each other and they become this big system that really functions together. And I think about getting chickens or ducks, and I think, well, if we did that, then we would need like a cat or a dog to like have some marker of the territory. And they do work together for a reason, and they were like that for a long time for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that obviously we've done quite a lot of ethereal stuff, but to get it down to practical, like if you have a garden, you need rabbits, right? Everyone used to, for a reason, because they eat all the extra garden produce, they turn it into incredible fertilizer. Chickens are okay, but like they generally, I think something we've realized is they're more food processors. Like they are good compost machines, and you're more food processing, so you have to bring in grain for them almost entirely, unless you have like 3 or 4 and you create a lot of leftovers.
Can we talk about how cute your rabbits are?
Oh my rabbits goodness, are super cute.
They're huge and
they taste
ugly.
Great.
So many benefits.
Like, I highly recommend rabbits for the cuteness of the thing. I mean, they are so like productive and tasty, take up so little space, and they give you such food security should you need to at any point.
What kind of rabbits are they, out of curiosity?
Oh, well, we have been working on our own breed, but they started off as New Zealand Reds, French Big Silvers, is what it's called in Swedish.
They're huge and so
They
fluffy.
are huge. And then we have a Dutch Lop. And now we're getting some crossbreeds, and we're aiming towards a mid-size. So 1.25 kilos slaughtered hanging weight. Sorry, everybody who struggles with that. Black pelted rabbit. And we're doing quite well. We're on Gen 3.
Do you work with the fur as well?
Yes, we do. Well, we've been really working towards producing more cohesive furs so that we can have like a black fur thing rather than, okay, it looks like you're wearing rabbit skins. That is quite difficult for people, I think.
Sure, yeah.
So whereas if we have like a black fur coat that's black, then people go, like, what's that? And you just, if they're never going to ask, they're going to assume it's plastic. The first thing is we have a problem of an excess of green waste that I don't like just composting. And I can turn it into a usable fertilizer in 2 days by putting it through a rabbit, and their manure can be used straight on the garden. So we have this beautiful integrated system that way. And it's about looking, again, sometimes integration just looking at the holes in both your life, but your garden, and going, okay, where do I need to bring something in to make this work? I also highly recommend like John Jevons works, Growing More Vegetables, for that. He has a really good integrated system about like how you produce the compost from your garden that you need for your garden.
Yeah.
And that's about growing carbon and growing, crops that give you a high yield of compostable material that's mostly from the sun. Well, hey.
We have been looking at redoing the garden, because most gardens here in the UK, especially in the suburbs, are like just either just lawn,
Yeah.
lawn with a border, and a paved bit to sit and eat on, and each bit is very separate.
Yeah.
And even in my thinking about redoing it,
Yeah.
I really struggle to think outside, well, we need a place to do this and a place to do that and a place to do that, and not like, oh, how I'd love to get it all to working and beautifully flowing together. I just really struggle to think outside that box. Like, it would be logical for us
No, but that's actually the right way to do it. But I think what you need to do is, first things, if you're having a real struggle at all, first go, what do I not want this garden to be? First of all. So write down what you don't want is really important. So if you don't know what to do, what pattern to make, and this can be for a garden or for life, what do I not want? I do not want it to be all these separate bits. Cool. Great. We have now defined what we're not going to do with our pattern. Second, go, what does each of the pattern details, I've got some details I like. Okay. What do these details represent? Okay. I want to have a sitting place. Okay. What does that represent? I want to, let's say, something communal. Okay. It's a place for being communal because I see that as a place where we're all going to sit as a family. Okay, so I need something, I want my garden. So now we have a principle or a pattern is I want familial engagement is the pattern. The sitting detail is what it's representing. And it's about looking at those and then going, okay. And then going, okay, now I've got more broad ideas. I've got bits that I know how to work into a pattern. Okay, so actually I want to have a sitting space, but I also want to have it be productive and I want to have this. Okay, cool. So it looks like you're building a raised deck with chickens underneath it. And then you're going to have this and this and this with garden on this side, raised beds close to the house because they're going to be warmer. I can use them 3 seasons. So therefore I can actually produce probably as much as I produce in 30 square meters in 5 because I can use all the seasons. I've got this extra warm bit by the house. I'm going to utilize that way. I think going to be raised beds, so I definitely can integrate it. And then I'm going to have this bit be just pretty flowers. And I'm not going to ever step on it because I'm going to wood chip it and have this raised bed in the middle, which represents this. And then you start going, oh, cool. And if you relinquish the desire to control the details, instead look at what the details are pointing out in your garden design, life, psyche, whatever, and go, this detail that I am obsessing about represents this for me. Okay, where does that then lead me to? Oh, I want more family time in the garden. Great. Then actually look at like, when did we actually spend more family time in the garden? Oh, actually, we didn't do it when we said, let's sit outside. The kids hated that. I didn't do it when I did this. Cool. When are you actually doing it already? And then make a space that facilitates that. There was a point where we ate complete crap. Like, you'd be shocked. Terrifyingly bad food. Chicken nugget pizza sandwich. Amazing. Worst thing ever. If I ate it now, would probably kill me. There's a highlight of that. And then when we started going like, we want to eat healthier. So we, instead of going like, I'm going to go on this diet, go Weight Watchers, whatever, we went, where already are we eating well? Okay, we are eating a roast dinner that we would cook completely from scratch every Sunday. Okay, let's just start by doubling this detail because we all like it and see what that does. And then we started having 2 roast dinners a week. And straight away, everyone felt just a little bit better energy when we'd have 2 roast dinners a week. So we'd have one on the Sunday and we'd have one on Wednesday. Then we're like, okay, so this starts to prove concept. And then we allow that detail and that pattern that we started, really small pattern change, really incremental, then go, okay, let's change this. I wonder, and then we like, okay, we can't really afford like this crazy, like good food. So the organic stuff from a local farm, it's ridiculous. We can't afford it because we are eating this much volume. So then I said like, okay, we can afford 1 meal a week that is this type of vegetables. So we made 1 meal that week with those type of vegetables and realized, oh, we're all full after eating half as much as we were eating of these other kinds of vegetables. And we're all properly full with good energy. Oh, okay, let's do that like once a week. And we didn't actually change straight away. I wish we had. It would be so much a better story if we were like instantaneously smarter. But we then were eating like 1 load of this really good soup and then putting like half, still making the same amount because we're so used to it, and then putting some in the freezer. And then we're like, wait a second, when we have meals in the freezer, we generally eat better. And that was like, oh, we could cook lots of meals and put them in the freezer. So then we started batch cooking a little bit. And also we realized, okay, because we're eating half as much, we can afford to buy half as much food as we eat right now, but have it be a better quality. And it's the point is, like, even in ignorance, even without like my own, like, now being more practiced in it, if you just go, I don't like this, I would like it to look like this, I'm going to change small details and slowly develop a pattern so that now we have a really solid family diet. I can tell you all the details of how we eat. I know the patterns of how we eat, what we eat seasonally, blah, 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 blah. It all sounds really big. But started going, I don't want to be fat. Cool. What are we going to do about it? Okay, what are we doing that's good already? Let's exemplify that. What's that represent? That represents, oh, that's because we're all cooking that all from scratch. What if we increase the quality of it? Oh, cool. It fills us more and we feel even better. And you start getting these feedback and then you build a pattern. And then whether it's your garden and the integration of that, your diet, your psyche, all of it's the same thing. Sometimes you just have to go, I hate this and I never want that in my life. Yeah. Cool. Great. Or I just want to change it smallly. And actually just let each bit of feedback, each observed change and its feedback to actually allow it to change you. Oh, imagine that.
Do you know what you've just done, though?
What?
You've disproved what you said at the end of the last podcast.
Which was what?
Small and slow solutions.
No, because I think small and so, here's my point. Yeah. Small and slow solutions, okay? The most important thing is that you fail at scale. I think this is actually really important because, and you adapt to the level that the feedback means. So there was a point where we also, so small and slow solutions work, but you have to make those small changes really quickly, right?
I think you have to change the bigger ethics. Yes. Otherwise, it stands on nothing but you trying to control a situation or be a good person or fit into culture. Yes. And it needs to come from a place that means something. Otherwise, the small and slow solutions are leading towards nothing and just sort of a wasted thing and a bit of a kind of gimmicky word.
It's a fad. You'll buy 3 things for, 8 things for. You'll try to sustain. You try to stay in control, and it leads to nothing but more slavery. Yay!
Yeah. So it has to have a purpose. I think I'm really feeling the small and slow at the minute because it's literally impossible to. And perhaps some of you listening to this at this point are like, this is a bit overwhelming. And I feel maybe a little bit judged and a bit guilty and a bit like all the feelings and it's a bit much. And I don't feel judged or guilty. I just feel like it's going to take a long time to change habits. Since the last podcast, which was not that long ago, I have been thinking and implementing. So I have been around, I've explored local farms. I've gone to some honesty shops. I've got some milk in jars. I've tried to do zero waste shopping. Yeah. And it is insanely challenging. Everything is stacked against you to live a life like that. It is
100%. It really is
so difficult. I went into Waitrose where I thought, Waitrose will be easy. That's a nice supermarket. Everything's already more expensive. Everything is wrapped in plastic. And even when I went to the cheese counter with my plastic tub to ask for some cheese, she wrapped the thing in plastic and put it in the plastic tub. And I was like, are we not getting what's happening? I only had 2 wins in the week. And one was, even the greengrocers, for example, I went to a greengrocers which had no plastic in it, but inside the quality of the produce was atrocious. It was all from so far away, and the actual, like the apples I got were really from a wholesaler.
Soft. Yeah, it was
rubbish. Awful, and so much more expensive.
Yeah.
So then I was like, okay, so I feel like, one, I'm grateful for Kezia of the Whole Home because she has paved a bit of a path of leading that kind of lifestyle in the UK and doing it on a budget, and I'm so grateful for that. So I think if anyone's interested in living, she doesn't tout herself in labels, and I think that's lovely, but she does live this like very sustainable lifestyle, which is really interesting. She gets boxes from Rainbow and Coal and the big bulk bags of grains and does all sorts of other things that are a little bit in the way, but trying to do it from scratch yourself is very difficult. And I happen to feel also that I live in a bit of an area where there's a big lack, there's a big hole. There's no, I don't have a regular local market I can visit. And I got so angry about it this week because I was just like, So I have to drive an extra 20 minutes from my kids' school, like there and back, to go and fill up with milk. There isn't a place to do it on the way back.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to do that. That feels like a sort of small win. The price isn't that much more expensive. And I can take my glass jars and fill it up. And it's kind of cute because you put the money in and you press the button and the kids think that's great.
Yeah.
I went to Reeves the baker and they were happy to put stuff in a tin. So I was like, cool, that's fine. That was a win. But like, everything else is just, it feels like a minefield. It feels like a battle. And the majority of people I know just don't have the energy to do that, which is why I think small and slow is good. And I think I have been doing that incrementally over years anyway, slowly and slowly, like adding things in there. Unless you are super rich or have a major lifestyle shift, like you move country and you have the opportunity to completely start from scratch and do it differently.
How many times have I restarted, do you think?
How many times have you restarted? Quite a lot.
You've seen my life, right?
Yeah.
And I think that each of those changes is on the outside is really dramatic. I left the military with not necessarily a solid plan how to, because I realized that if I stayed there, I would become a husband and father I didn't want to be.
Yes.
And I loved being in the military. I was very good at medic. I was planning to be in there for quite a long time, even though that was a very weird story. Get back to some other time. I knew deep in my heart that there was something dramatically wrong with where I was going that I did not feel was honorable or right. And therefore, when you decide something grander than yourself and you say that those principles or ethics are better than yourself, and you look at your life honestly and you see a fault and you have any capacity to change it, it is your duty to change it. And you need to put in the work, because otherwise you are going to pass that slavery down to your kids.
I don't think most people have that cognizance.
I understand. I'm saying is that each change in my life, however small, starts with, I have this much cognition. I know a little bit more about myself and I see a feedback. And I know, and I think as parents, you do know, and people avoid it. And they all know. Everyone knows. I would say that most people don't have that cognition. But I think that actually what people have is they have really solid avoidance strategies they've learned from childhood. And because your brain is already looking after you, and I think it's really good. I think it's survival instinct. And I think some people are so traumatized that, like, I understand how difficult that is to look into that dark mirror of the soul and go, oh, that's horrible. Or look at the kids and go, the kids are reflecting this to me. What does that mean? Okay, that means this. Okay. And I think that what I mean by what I said before is small and slow change sounds great, but I think that can be overwhelmed by a culture that's loud, big, and destroys things really quickly. So I think it's better to make a big step and put a bulwark up, something that you can stand behind, however tiny, and then start building something there. I think that people are so disempowered in this age, especially women, that they feel like they don't have agency. And they don't feel like they can make big changes, and people are being made to feel incapable. And I think that's one of the biggest crimes. And it makes people, because it also allows people to go to their weakest, poorest side instead of seeing the incredible power and agency that they have. To make any big change, you're going to have to give up control. You're going to have to go through hardship, but always on the other side, there will be more richness. Even if you try to do what you believe in and fail gloriously, like we talked about before, like really badly, that failure will give you something. And it will give you something that was so much richer than the control that you had.
I suppose we could talk about learning from failure. It's the only way to learn, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's depressing. But it is, yeah. Most people try and avoid it because they don't like it.
And the point is that people are so worried about things getting worse, they'll never get better. So they live these mediocre lives because they think that's all they have.
Yeah.
They won't do the things. Like, I reckon if I was to sit down with you for 10 minutes on Google and we sat down, I reckon I could figure out how you get better food. And it will be something like get a larger freezer and do one big bulk run to a market you do like or a farm you do like, and be better at buying in bulk and have a better larder. It's so difficult
to balance the cost of things. Yeah. So in Sainsbury's, I can get organic meat for a good price.
Cool.
And things like nitrate-free bacon.
Yeah.
That we really believe those things passionately, that we've chosen them. And but those will come in plastic. So then if I
Yeah.
want to do that plastic free, it literally is going to cost me twice as much. And we can't
Okay.
afford to do that at the moment because everything's ludicrously expensive.
But let me give you a story. Let me tell you a story that could be true. Okay. You know a guy, and who we both know, who raises good pigs, not organic pigs, but healthy outdoor pigs.
Yes.
He sells half pigs.
Yeah.
The packaging on that is considerably less. You can buy a half or a whole pig. You could buy a whole pig, probably paper wrapped, because butchers in the UK did used to and still can get butcher's paper. If you go to a butcher's and say, I would like this to be wrapped in paper and I'm happy to provide the paper, they will take it off the counter and wrap it in paper for you. Here's another idea. Okay, practical idea about how to do it better.
This is great because it literally has been hurting my head trying to solve something that I don't know how to solve.
This is something that we did for ourselves when we were pretty skint. Okay, like really poor at the time. We were struggling with food and all sorts of things. We decided that instead of any Christmas presents, we would gift ourselves a 2-week food store. That instead of spending money on Christmas, we would get 2 weeks ahead on food. Okay, we took 2 weeks of shopping money. Instead of buying presents for each other or stockings or anything, we bought that for ourselves. So straight away, it takes the food pressure off. So it means you have more capacity to make better decisions. So we went to a bigger, this is in the UK, so we bought from, I think, Dove's Farm at the time, like a 5-kilo bag of flour, because we were eating 2.5 kilos of flour a week. We went to an organic supplier and we went and bought loads of vegetables, all seconds, and bought as much bulk as we could for, I think, 1 week's worth of shopping. And then we went and we bought a deer carcass from the game dealer. All in all, I think we spent the 2 weeks worth of shopping plus 25 quid's worth of petrol, because we were driving quite a bit. But it was one day,
it has to be factored
in. So it wasn't like that was. I think that was when petrol was quite high. So yeah, we drove for about probably 2.5 hours of driving to do all of that. We had to buy a small chest freezer. I think it was 60 liters. It cost us 120 quid, but we asked for that from someone else for Christmas, someone who gave us big presents. And that liberty there started a pattern of us having agency in our food choices. So we weren't then needing to go to the shops. So then we started doing things like we bought every month we could afford to buy one large Le Parfait jar that's round that we could freeze things in. Okay. Before that, we just used plastic tubs we had around the house and would freeze soup in plastic tubs and chili in plastic tubs and all these things that we made in bulk. So then we start having agency in our food choices. If you want to have agency in food choices, you want to do things you have to start thinking longer than week by week by week, because that's part of the way the consumer food consumes you. You can go Dove's Farm now online and they will deliver in a paper reinforced bag 20 kilos of flour.
Gluten-free, mate.
What?
I'm gluten-free.
Okay. There will be okay, in that case, then you also have to change the diet of your home. I think that's the other thing is we're stuck into patterns that are just potatoes and rice. No, potatoes and buckwheat pancakes, things that grow here. Buckwheat's great. You can buy it from from Polish markets a lot of the time, or from parts of Tesco's.
That was my one thing that Waitrose did do for me. Was they do supply big bags of big-ish bags of buckwheat in paper packaging, whereas previously I got it in plastic.
Cool.
But
my point being is that
one place got it in plastic and the others in paper, and why is it drives me nuts?
It's all coming from the same supplier, probably. But my point is, if you also then go and say, right, just type it online, 20 kilograms of buckwheat, find out, someone will supply it. Someone will supply it to it. Someone will give it to you. You can even buy it as a seed from a seed factory, and you can then grind it yourself. There is always a way around it. But first, we have to say, I am happy to eat differently. I am happy to allow seasonality, and I'm happy to stay 2 weeks ahead. And it's a sacrifice. And I've done it when we're poor. I've done it when we're well off. I've done it every time. And each time it can be as much or as little as sacrifice you can. But you have to look at the joy of it. You have to look at what's it serving. What's it driving you towards? Anyway, I feel like we should get back to another principle. What do you think?
Well, these are all blending beautifully, because the next one is use and value diversity. Yeah.
This is something that we do in our garden. So I'm going to do this one practically the garden, and I will try not to turn it too psychological. Yeah. The more diversity you have in the garden, when weather changes in the summer, you can have so much more food. When you have good diversity, you can be adaptive to climatic conditions. You can be adaptive to pest pressure. And I think that also, like, generally diversity in the home, diversity of solutions allows you so much more richness in life.
My allotment, my very first allotment,
yeah,
I followed these sort of principles of adding like flowers, even though they didn't really do anything. But that diversity is so important because it brings, I mean, especially in the garden, it brings in all sorts of different pollinators and helpful bugs, and then the system actually all works together. And that is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it means then even something as simple as green fly is gone if you have certain flowers that bring in the things that eat the green fly.
I agree with that. I've definitely witnessed that in our garden. I was a bit resistant to flowers because I was like, if I put flowers there, I can't put more beans. And obviously, talking about integration, right? I wanted bees, so I planted flowers for bees that I was going to get. I think that also diversity brings joy when you're just like focused on like the happiness of like just your cabbages, which I highly recommend as a mental stimulant for growth, is growing cabbages anywhere, because there are so many things that think that cabbages are the very best thing for them to eat. And if you get to a point where you can have sauerkraut, well done. It makes you one of the better people in the world if you can successfully grow a decent cabbage. I really believe that.
Actually, when we joined this new allotment, I did grow cabbages successfully, and it was amazing because everybody was like, oh, you must be a much better gardener than we thought.
Yeah, it's true. It does make you a better person. Year 1, cabbages are easy. Year 2, cabbages get harder. But if you make year 3 cabbages, I mean, genuinely, I just think you're a much better adjusted person than everyone else, because the amount of pressure, again, organically, not with poison, but I think that if
I didn't even have a cover over mine. It was some sort of freaky magic, because everyone was like, oh, we've got to grow cabbages under cover because they're going to get eaten by all the pests.
Nope, not at all.
Magic.
But they do need to, like, you need to get the right type of cabbage for your area, and you need to find what you need to fertilize them. Yeah, this year we grew them on lamb's wool. But we put a huge amount of lamb's wool at the base of where they were going to reach to. So we had way tighter heads this year, which meant that they had less pest pressure. And even though the outer leaves got spanked, we still got really nice heads of cabbage. Lack of diversity, and like, it's dull and boring and rubbish. And also that can be, but even in that, you can have really monotone like food inputs and then have a diversity in the way that you prepare them.
Mm-hmm.
And then that diversity of mindset of like, I have
like
to
apples.
be diverse. Like apples. Oh my goodness. I love apples.
I'm going apple picking this weekend, hopefully.
Oh, that'll be lovely. Yeah.
So what shall I make them into? I mean, there's so many opportunities.
Oh, mate, don't even get me started on apples. That's a whole podcast. But very quickly, let's go through this. Okay, first, get an apple press. Whatever size you can afford, get one. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And a scratter. You can get them really cheap.
What's a scratter?
Scratter is something that smashes up apples, like an apple cruncher, an apple mill, an apple shredder. You can do it through a food processor, but it takes a bit more time. We have a manual scratter. It cost us 27 quid about 5 years ago. Fantastic bit of kit. Terrible Chinese. I'm sure everything about it's wrong, but the amount of diversity and life it has brought into our life and diet, and the fact that we look after it, means it's lasted really well. And seems like it will last for a lot longer. You scrat and then you press. You scrat, you put it into a bag, and then you press it. Again, all manually. Works really well.
Cool.
So if you have access to a lot of apples, or you can get access to a lot of apples, they are an incredible way to sustain the home. Mm-hmm. Dried, chipped, in rings, in fruit leather, in apple mousse, what do people call it? It's not Swedish.
Puree.
Apple puree, apple butter, Liège syrup, like where you take the syrup, you take the apple juice and you cook it down till it becomes like a molasses. Oh, it's so good.
Dried
Cider. Apple rings. Yeah, apple rings easy, but I think nowadays we are moving more towards apple chips, because apple rings are just snacky. Whereas apple chips,
one extra crispy.
One is just cut up into smaller bits that you can rehydrate for a crumble. So the bits are thicker, but they're cut smaller. So you cut them into, say, a sixth of an apple, but the thickness is about half an inch. You can fit a lot more into the dehydrator, so you have more efficiency of the tool. Because they're smaller, they dehydrate faster, and you can rehydrate them into pies. You can rehydrate it into a crumble, and you're using it just like an apple. but you're storing 120 apples, I think it is, in like a 3 litre jar. When you really pash it in there, you can put that many in, and therefore, when you are in the middle of February and you want to have a crumble, you want to have a crumble every day, you can.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Cool.
apples. So yeah, we and our last principle, or we got a couple more to go?
We've got 2 more to go. I want to add to that use and value diversity.
Yeah.
Just quickly, because something where it relates to the homemaker, and one thing I really appreciate about homes is when it's not just all from the same shops, like the stuff in the house. So there's a sort of standard for homes where they actually all end up looking very much the same. And I love homes where you get some diversity. Say you've picked up something, or you've made something, you've picked up something secondhand, and your house looks different. That to me is something, as you said, diversity brings joy. It's something so much to be celebrated. I'm so happy when I go in homes that don't all look the same.
Yes.
What I'm trying to say is, if you only ever shop from like the same 2 shops that everyone shops and we all look the same, that's sad. I like when I see personality in people's homes. Being you and expressing yourself in your home and expressing who you are, and not just doing the same as everyone else because that's what everyone does and it's like the cheapest thing or the most convenient thing, is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Homogeneity is terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. Number 11, use edges and value the marginal. I think in the home, you do get these blocks as a homemaker, and I get these all the time, where there are just spaces around the house that you don't see, or that end up building up clutter, or there's a cupboard that you just jam everything in. And when you will learn how to use those, that is so life-changing. You don't get this problem, as we spoke about in the last podcast. Your house is all well used, and it has to be. And I think the problem with the majority of people I know is, even if it's just a drawer where you sort of chuck a load of junk in, I mean, that's probably absolutely fine. Everyone probably should have a junk drawer where you chuck stuff. But I think anytime you find a way to use spaces in a functional way, and you value it in a different way, and you create something new out of it, it's incredibly powerful. And yeah, I don't know, bringing any kind of order to chaos is always a good thing.
I mean, in permaculture, talk a lot about like the edge is the most productive. So like the edge of a forest is where like the most life and diversity is, because of like the amount of sunshine. So when you're looking about gardens, I think that's something that's like worthwhile just pointing out for those who don't do or read permaculture. Like the idea of edges, like and marginal, these bits is actually where the most productivity is possible. I mean, the ends of some of our beds, especially the southeasterly ends of some of our beds, for example, are incredibly more productive.
Relates to so many of the things we've said. I mentioned foraging, or eating outside, or going and seeing what there is in your local hedgerows and stuff like that. I mean, that all connects back to that. So there's so much value to be had in those areas.
Marginal, and I think also, like, even then for you, when you're looking for something new, or whether it's in the home things, looking to those sort of more niche, those markets, those niche philosophies that can help you. Because I think even for me, going to more extreme philosophies allows you to then moderate down from seeing what you need from them. More extreme, like methods of gardening and trying things out and going to the edge of your even things there again. Oh no, I didn't think I was going to go off on this one, but I'm going to. The edge of your capacity. And I think we talked about this before, like where finding those where your limits are, finding where your margins are, finding out where you're not willing to cross by pushing yourself, because people don't.
No.
They push themselves and think, I've got there. And you're like, no, you've got so much more. You're so much more powerful than this. And when you push your margins, your edges, as a homemaker, as a mother, as a partner, you go, where am I willing to go? As in having set your, like, this is where I want to get to. Okay, how far can you push that edge and margin in your mind, in your home, in your design aesthetic? Take it too far. And that's what I wanted to say before. Like, this small and beautiful is fine, but I'd rather everyone just went like way too far. You know, and then went, okay, I can pull back from that. But actually, having never gone too far, you don't know how to pull back. You don't know where your edges, you don't know where your margins are. You don't have a clue, and you don't know where you're willing to go for your kids. And I think the wonderful and sad thing about like having like kids die is it goes like, here's part of your margin, just gives you it really easily. I think I don't have to work so hard for that. I go like, okay, cool. I saw aspects of where I was willing to push to. And the answer was like the limit of my psyche after my daughter died and my wife like had some real problems mental health wise. Like the limit of that was like, is it incredible? Like I thought I was doing really well. I thought I was like a very well-adjusted person. I thought I was doing some deep work and really making changes. And then I realized like how unbelievably pathetic what I was doing before was, because something pushed me way beyond my capacity. And I looked at it and went, wow, like God, I believe, gave me an opportunity through some disaster. Like God always, like there's always like an opportunity in all the darkest things, right?
You know, that's the next principle.
Yeah. What is it?
Yeah. Creatively use and respond to change.
Yeah. And so, well, let's wrap this in there as well. It's like when you have those things, when you're pushing, if you don't push edge, you will not get an opportunity to creatively respond. You need to push yourself. And I think that's what I meant at the beginning of the last episode. I think that we're so nicey, and especially yourself, you're so lovely, that you miss out on the opportunity to just beast yourself. Like I am too mean on myself, right? Definitely. But that's how I stay strong. Like, so I have to be my own critic and I have to push myself because I also know what my capacity is, because I have been repeatedly pushed. I put myself in situations where I test my limits regularly as both a parent, as a homemaker. We set artificial boundaries. Like, okay, I'm not going to buy this. I just think it's wrong. And if I buy this, I support, like we decided really quickly, like, and this is one of our second or third changes after roast dinners, was that I was into bushcraft. I still always have been, you know, and indigenous people at that point in my life. And someone said, like, this palm oil plantation just took over this place. And if you eat palm oil, you're supporting it. And I was like, right, I'm never going to do that. I think within like a week, we just stopped. It made me read every packet of processed stuff we bought and anything palm oil I didn't buy. But my point being, right, immediately, because I made a decision about that allowed a radical change in life, because suddenly meant that we couldn't buy anything processed. We both made a decision for that allowed radical change. It pushed our edge at that point, feeling very uncomfortable because we couldn't buy anything processed, bar like two things.
But then that process, so going back to like, I think it's number 9, small and slow and steady wins the race. Like that will take a long time to implement that and work out what that means.
Nope. It's just a case of decide. Do you want to, like, for example, here's a really simple thing that really annoyed me. Fair trade. Mm-hmm. If you buy cane sugar that does not have and it's from like outside of England, it's not like a beet sugar that's processed, which a lot of sugar is. If you buy cane sugar, it's not fair trade. You are saying, I support slavery, right?
Yes.
You, for a while, worked for a church and they wouldn't spend the extra money for a long time on more expensive cane sugar because it was too expensive for the church budget. And I said, you do realize that is you choosing this process. I had a very impassioned speech. It was completely inappropriate at the meeting it was at. I got told off. Good. Anyway, that was me pushing my edge badly, but it had a positive result, which is that and it was a horrible guilt, shame thing. But my point is, like, sometimes there is things that are negative that can cause a positive change. Mm-hmm. If you decide you do not want to do something and then you say, I am never going to do it again, I'm going to break an addiction, I'm going to break this system of control, I'm going to stop this in my life, I choose this. And then you do the work of it, you will make significant change. And even if you do not make that choice, you are still making that choice. You're making that choice for your future, your family, your home. And that sucks. And that's why I hate this small and slow thing, because it allows people to keep you small and keep you into nothing. Because, like, I bought cool new jars. Great. Who cares? What does it stand for? What are you doing? Who do you want to be? What are you building for your family? What are you building for this home? What beauty are you bringing to the world? And does it have meaning? And what meaning are you going to imbue it with? Yes, make small and slow change, but make it to a radical point. Build to something big. Yes, a house is made of like 1 million bricks. How do you eat an elephant a chunk at a time? But decide you're going to eat an elephant. Decide you're going to build a house, right? Yeah. Don't just go and I had one bite of elephant meat. Who cares? Right? But I'm going to eat this elephant one bite at a time, and then you eat an elephant. That's intense. Like, I know that's a silly metaphor, but we all know what we mean, right?
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to build a house. I've got one brick. Cool. I put the brick down. I laid it. What are you going to do now? I'm going to put another brick down. I'm going to put another brick down. And slowly I'm going to build something I actually care about.
That's so hard.
No, it's not.
Yeah, but it is though.
No, it's not, because you just make one decision. Like, I will not do
Yeah,
this.
but that's the point. If you make one decision after another, it doesn't feel as bad. It doesn't feel as hard.
No, it's not. It's a case of make one big decision and then allow the other decision.
Yes.
All the small changes cascade. I will never support slavery of like children in the world. Cool. And that might look like I just buy Tony's chocolonely, right? It might be that like I definitely won't buy crap chocolate again because I know it puts kids in slavery. Cool. I am not going to buy cheap clothes because it puts kids in slavery, and I refuse to be part of child slavery.
Yep.
Like, make that decision. It's not hard.
The slight aside to this, though, is that there's two kind of modern things that spin off this, because this has been trendy at some point. That one, companies feed off that fact and market to you all that greenwashing kind of rubbish that you actually have to be super aware of. And then the second thing is a lot of people thinking, oh, well, you think really well of yourself if you don't do that. I can't possibly afford to do that. I get that all the time.
Well, the point is, that's it. They want to guilt you out of doing something.
It's just some obvious choices that you make other people feel bad.
It's not nice to me if people feel bad, but that's how the culture controls you. It's not about the companies. It's about other people making you feel like making an ethical decision not to enslave kids is bad.
It's awful, isn't it? It's just because they feel
not
guilty
to destroy
themselves.
rainforests. Yeah, of course. They want to hide. They're hiding from the initiation that you're experiencing. Children look at adults in tribal societies and go, oh, that's the other side of initiation. And if they all didn't, imagine like if we had a whole culture who just never initiated, never went through anything hard. Imagine what the adults would be like. They'd be angry children shouting down at other children. And that's a lot of where our culture's at, because they won't go through the initiation. You can go through all these principles, but the end of it is just like, follow something that's higher than yourself and organize yourself to principles that don't cause destruction. It's not that complicated.
No, it isn't.
But if you want to make it complicated, this is a pretty good set of principles to make it complicated with.
No, I mean, arguably, these are all very simple principles, and we've probably overcomplicated some.
Nope.
But it's just...
Yeah.
No, we probably haven't. I guess the point is they're quite open, and you can interpret them into every facet of your life, which is sort of what we've done in these 2 episodes. And thank you.
Thank you.
I think this is like, it's mind-blowing, life-changing, and I'm just so grateful that you were here today.
That was lovely. I'm really grateful we went through that. I really enjoyed it as a trip into the deeper, darker sides of my mind and soul, and a good reminder of things that really matter to me. Recommendations for your audience. Yes. Retrosuburbia is a really good book if you want to change like practical things about your home to make it more cohesive. I also highly recommend The Way Home by Mark Boyle.
Totally got it. Totally read it. Amazing book. Yeah.
Really good book, because it shows you like someone saying, here's a principle and I lived it out and this is what it means. Sorry for the screaming in the background at the end here.
Super. I think I read that in 2 days. It was amazing. Such a good book. And
it's saying, here's a principle, I chose to live it out, this is what it looks like. And he did it with The Moneyless Man as well, and these other things where it's like, I decided this is a hard thing, but I don't want to live like this, so I'm going to do this. And I think that's powerful. And then you also see someone then work back to some form of moderation. I love you. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to talking to you again in like another quarter or whatever it is, half a year, whenever it is we talk again.
That sounds fabulous.
Or like next week, normally.
Yeah, normally we'll just chat in another week. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me. Can't even. It's so good. There's so much to take away on this one, and I'm glad there's 2 weeks between podcast episodes, so everyone's got time to chew on it. Cool. Thank you. Really looking forward to seeing you soon. Bye. Yeah. Bye. 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 So there you have it. I hope you really enjoyed this little mini series I did with Martin. If you want to check him out, go onto Instagram and follow him at The Roots and Bones. And me, I'm over at The English Homemaker. If you enjoyed this episode, please send me a DM or a message somehow. Leave me a comment somewhere along the lines, and I would love to hear what you have to say about it and what thoughts you have. I feel like this was a really thought-provoking episode, and I just like to see how it resonates with you. Thank you so much for joining us today, and check back soon for a new episode. Bye.